Hello, 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 Jasmine. Early bird gets the worm indeed. Or late in your case, because it's later there, obviously. Bit of a dad joke to kick things off here today. Do feel free to say hello. Love to hear from you. Just a note about the class today. I hope the light's okay. There's been a few comments recently about the lighting being quite dark, and I am working to sort that out. I've recently moved venues, and the light in my last place was incredible, and the light here, it's just a lot dimmer, naturally just a lot darker. So I am trying to sort that out. If you just bear with me, if you do find it dark on your screen, if you can just turn your brightness up for the time being. What I'm working on is that you don't need to do that. It can just be at a normal level. But for now, lighting looks good. Thank you very much. But do you have also your brightness turned all the way up? Because that apparently should not be required according to sources unknown to you. Let's just see here. So we're going to get started here in just a moment. Hello, Steve. Welcome. Lovely to have you. Jasmine also. I can see there's a few other people on. So if you'd like to say hello in the chat box, please feel free. It would be lovely to see you and hear from you. So the way that these classes work is you're on YouTube, and afterwards you can always watch the recording here if you'd like to. The recipe that we're going to be following in today's class and all the classes that we do through YouTube. Okay, thank you very much. Good to hear that the lighting is good. They're always going to be available. The recordings are available through my YouTube channel. So you don't need to worry if you miss anything. Everything's going to be there. The recipe for today's class is in the description for today's class as well. That's always going to be the case with the classes. Today's class, I think, is a popular one because we're doing ganache. I would assume that's why people are so interested. When I did the truffles, it was also a very popular class. So it's great to see what you're all really interested in and what draws your attention. And if there's anything else that you'd like to see, maybe a white ganache, maybe that's something that you'd be interested in seeing demoed and have questions about. Please let me know, because these classes are for you. So I'm just trying to feel my way through what you're most interested in. But if you want to tell me, that would also be fantastic. Hello, ATP from Ibiza. Welcome. So as we go along, do feel free to ask questions, and white ganache is a yes from Jasmine. So fantastic. We'll do that soon as well. All right, so we're going to get started first with the brownie base. So the recipe for today's class is a Ganache Brownie Bars. You can do any kind of base that you want. So if you have a base that you really like, that's like a no-bake cheesecake base or anything like that, you can do the same thing. As long as you can roll it out and cut it, you can do it for this as well. So we're going to be using a ganache frame in this class. You don't have to use this if you don't want to. I really do like it a lot for just messing around with things in the kitchen. I have a few of these at this size, which you can see is quite small. And then I have a much larger one. I actually don't use that a whole lot. I do use these quite a bit. The reason I like the ganache frame is because you can cut it into whatever shape you want. So it can be cut in half and then in half to make squares. You can cut it again into small bars, triangles, diamonds, whatever kind of shape you want to go for, aside from things that are circular, you can do with this frame. And I really like it for that reason. It also stretches you a little bit in using something that isn't silicone mold. If you're using silicone molds at the moment and you want to do something a little bit different, frames are a really fun thing to mess around with. You can use the recipes that we're doing today. I have other recipes on my website that use these, paid classes, free content, etc. So anything that sets firm will come out of this frame. As long as it sets relatively firmly, it'll come out of the frame. So don't want to do anything that's liquidy, because that's going to, as soon as you take the frame away, it's going to ploop. But anything that sets firm, if you're talking about cheesecakes or brownie bars like this, the bounty bars that I do use this frame, any kind of ganache that sets, you can use the frame. So that, and then underneath it, I have an acetate sheet. I just have acetate around because I do a lot of chocolate work, but you can use parchment paper, greaseproof paper, whatever you have. And then that's just sat on a baking tray. Nothing special about this. It's just a tray that happens to fit everything. So you just want to find something that works for you. The tray here is going to give us stability and a place for the frame to sit and everything to set while it's in the refrigerator. So we can put this aside for just a moment. And I don't use a rolling pin. I use a cling film roll. So you can use a rolling pin for rolling things out if you like, whatever you want to do. We're going to get started here with the brownie base. Now, I've got everything pre-weighed to just speed things along a little bit. So in this bowl, I have the dry ingredients, which is the whole first set of ingredients that's in the recipe that you'll see when you go to the website. So I'll read it out for you. We've got oat flour. I buy gluten-free oat flour, but if you make your own from rolled oats, like in a blender, for example, that's also fine. You might find it doesn't have the same fine texture to it, but it'll just have a little bit of chewiness, and there's nothing wrong with that. Ground almonds are ground blanched almonds, not almond flour that's partially defatted. So ground almond in the States, there's not really much differentiation. In the UK, there's a difference between ground almonds, which are blanched ground almonds, and almond flour, which is partially defatted flour. In the States, I think it's sort of interchangeable. So if you're ever confused about which is which, have a look at the ingredient label, the nutrition label. And if per 100 grams of almonds, whatever the almond source is, flour, ground almonds, if it's like 50% fat, then you know that it's actually the whole nut. And that's what we want for this recipe, but in other recipes, you might want the partially defatted because you don't want the fat content in there for whatever reason. For example, if you're making chocolate in a stone grinder. Cocoa powder, I'm using an extra dark Calabos dark cocoa powder. It's obviously 100%. There's nothing else added to it. You can use any kind of cocoa powder that you like. Coconut sugar, almond butter. You can use any kind of nut butter or seed butter that you'd like. Cocoa paste can be interchanged with dark chocolate, milk chocolate. You don't have to use cocoa paste if you don't work with that. You can use dark chocolate. Get a bar of chocolate you like from the shop, melt that down. What that gives to the recipe is a richness. It also helps with setting the base as well, but it does give that brownie vibe as well. And then for our wet ingredients, so that's sort of dry ingredients, a little bit of wet over here. And then we've got medjool dates that are nice and sticky, like moist, fresh medjool dates. If you're using ones from a packet, you'll need to soak them till they're soft, drain out that liquid, maybe use it for something else because it's nice and sweet, or get rid of it, whatever you want to do, and then drain out as much water as you can. Now, bear in mind that by adding that water, the soaked dates, you are going to add water to the recipe. So that'll change a little bit how much maple syrup or water you use at the end of the blending to get it to sort of stick together, as it were. But that's just a little side note. So we'll come back to that when we get to that point in the recipe. And then the almond butter is also in here, and we'll add those things together. So I always, when it comes to doing stuff in the food processor, I start with the dry ingredients and I get those just processed through because they're all just mixed together roughly at the moment. So just a little bit of a pulse to mix that through just to get it all nicely combined. And then we can go in with our first set of the wet ingredients, which is going to be our dates and our almond butter. So that goes in. And when we add this in, what we're looking for is the dates to break down. So that can take, 30 seconds, depending on, what kind of machine you have, how sharp the blade is, that kind of thing. So you can just let the machine run. And I'll just turn this off. I don't know if you can hear me when that's running. Once the dates are broken down, you'll start hearing the food processor stop making so much noise, and then you can open it up and have a look. If you want little pieces of date in there, that's fine. Right now, I can feel and see that there's just some little like pebble-like sized ones, and I'd like this to be nice and smooth, so I'm going to keep going just for a moment. We are going to blend it again in a second when we add other stuff in, but let's just get to the texture that we want first. So we're not needing to do that with chocolate in there. And that's sounding a bit better. So take the lid off. And at this stage, I want to go through the process of how do you determine when it's done, if it's moist enough. And this is kind of like a press test. So if I press it together right now, I can see straight away, I can feel also that it's just very dry, very crumbly. So it's not anywhere near being ready. The other thing is you'll always get stuff that goes under the blade in the food processor. So I like to just scrape that out, put the blade back in. You'll do that a few times. You can do it right at the end, but I tend to do it throughout. And then this goes back on, pulse that through, and then everything that was down under the blade has now mixed in. And there's a question, is this machine Magimix? This is actually a Cuisinart. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this machine. It's great, like power wise, it's really good. I think the thing I don't like about it, the way that the lid goes on. So I'll just show you what I mean. So the lid goes on normal food processors. I think it just sort of locks in place. This one snaps here and it snaps here. If you don't snap it here, if you forget, you can start blending. Like it doesn't have a locking mechanism for that. So you can start blending with this off and it just goes everywhere. That's one thing I don't like about it. The other thing is you can't really clean in this rubber seal very well at all, and stuff gets stuck in there, and I don't like that at all. So the machine that I would get if I got a new one is the Sage. I can't remember what it's called in this country versus the US, but either the Sage or the Breville, it's called one or the other, is a really fantastic food processor, really high powered. It has a blade on the bottom and a blade further up as well, so it blends fast, and it's a larger capacity as well. Found it quite easy to clean too, so that's that. And then a little bit of tamari. Tamari is a wheat-free soy sauce, and I use it in anything that I do that's chocolate or caramel. Obviously, I don't use it when I do like fruity stuff, but it's like adding salt, but it gives it like a natural flavor balancing. It brings out the cocoa or the caramel. It brings out spice. It's a really beautiful flavor enhancer. It's something that you can be adding into your savory dishes as well. If you're making a little bit of soup, even minestrone, like it doesn't have to be like a beef stew, but like minestrone or whatever, add a little bit of tamari in there and it naturally boosts the flavor of your soup like quite considerably. It's similar to adding salt, but it just has a better like sort of umami vibe. And then sea salt is always going to be a good idea. Another natural flavor enhancer. I use Celtic sea salt. You can use any kind of salt that you like. And now at this stage, we're looking, like I showed you the press test, it's quite dry. So we're going to be looking for something that brings this together and makes it moist. The first thing that we're going to add in is our cocoa paste or chocolate. And I just melt mine in a frying pan over a low heat. If you don't have a super low heat on your stove, you just want to go at like intermittent stages. So turn the pan on and let it get hot to where you can hold your hand on it and it's not going to hurt your hand. And then you can turn the heat off and let it melt against the residual heat of the pan. You can just do that and you'll melt your chocolate doing it that way versus doing a double boiler. So let's get that blended through. And that's just not going to be enough to get you what you're looking for. So if we do another press test, you can see that that's no longer as dry as it was, but it's not there yet. And at this stage, this is where you have the option of you can add water to it. And if you're doing something for home, you're not planning on selling this, you're not really bothered about the shelf life, you can just add water at this point. And you might want to taste it first and see if you want it to be a bit sweeter. So you can either opt for water or a liquid sweetener. At this point, we're just looking for something to bring the mixture together. So I always do a little bit of maple because it adds a little bit of sweetness when you're using dark chocolate, and it gives the liquid that we're looking for, but it also retains a good shelf life. I do a bonbon with this brownie in it, an almond brownie bonbon, and it keeps for like 8 weeks. I mean, in terms of keeps, it keeps a really long time, but the bonbon itself stays really well for about 6 to 8 weeks. Now that gets blended through. We don't want to be over processing this because you don't want to over process the chocolate. It's just to get it mixed through, and then we can do another press test. So first, before we do that, let's get all of the liquid that shoots up onto the sides down. Give it one more process. And then do another test. So the test is, again, press. Now at this stage, what we're looking for is if I roll this out, is it going to crack? And that's looking pretty good. So you can see on the edges here, it's just cracking slightly when I press it. I'm not so bothered about that. I don't mind it being on the slightly drier side. If you want it to be a little bit more sticky and moist, a little bit more water, a little bit more maple, we're looking at something that's like a teaspoon, not much. And Sherry is with us. Just wanted to share that I have a Cuisinart different than yours, and I'm happy with it. It's a 16 cup and no seal and easy to clean. Yeah, mostly Cuisinart I think is a pretty decent food processor. I grew up with Cuisinart in our kitchen at home. But this one, I just think this model, they tried to do something interesting and it didn't work out so well. Cool. So one more pulse and then we're going to turn this out. Another note is on this crust is on anything where you're going to be using chocolate, cocoa butter. it's going to start setting in the, like, as you're working with it, it's cooling the whole time that you're working with it. This is the same with anything to do with chocolate. It's always going to be cooling. I'm going to add just a touch of maple because I changed my mind and I want it to be a little bit more wet. And so if you do this and it gets to the consistency that you like and you walk away for a little while, an hour, you're going to come back to what feels like a really dry mixture and you're going to wonder what happened. It's not that it's dried out, it's that the chocolate has begun to set, and that's why it's seemingly dried out, but it's not actually dried out. So what you can do is pop it back in the food processor, buzz it a couple times, add a little bit more maple to it, and that will, or water, and that will help to bring it back to a kind of pliable state. I would resist the urge to warm the mixture because you can break the chocolate. And there's no coming back from that. You'll break the oil. Okay, we're not going to need a lot. So I'm going to take this kind of ball of our dough here. And the acetate sheet is here. I know you can't see it, but you just have to trust that it's there. And then I'm just going to start by pressing it. Now, the frame itself is only about just under an inch in height. So I don't want this to be too thick. If it's too thick, it's going to take up the majority of the frame. So we want it to be slightly thinner than that. So I'm going to grab my cling film. You can use whatever you'd like, rolling pin, whatever, to do this. And worst case, it's too thick. You press the frame on. You realize it's too thick. Take the frame off, roll it out a little bit more, and then press it again. But, you know, it's up to you. This is the cool thing about doing stuff yourself, to determine how thick is too thick, how thick do you want it. So press the frame, hold the frame in place as you remove the excess. And then with the rest of this brownie recipe, you could roll it out, cut it into squares, dip them in chocolate, cut them in thicker squares, you know, and dip them in chocolate. You can save it for later. So the thing I said about once it's set or it's dried, when you come back to it, just buzz it in the food processor again, add a little bit more liquid to it. It'll come back to life and you can work with it again. So this is what it looks like once it's in the frame. So it's taking up, I don't know, maybe like a third to a quarter. Again, I apologize for the light. I know it's not fantastic at the moment. And then this whole thing goes onto your tray. And we want to keep the frame on, obviously. You don't want to be taking that off. So for the moment, I'm going to pop that to the side. You don't need to put it in the fridge. It doesn't matter. Like right now, it's firm enough that it's going to hold the ganache when you put it on. So you don't need to worry about that. Pop that to the side, and then we'll have a look at making our ganache, which is really simple. The other recipes you would have seen me do, we did a free class a little while back where we did a waterless ganache, which would also work in this recipe. It would come out of the mold and it would be good. But this one's like juicier because obviously it's a water-based ganache, so it's kind of like juicier, softer, gooier. The waterless is really nice for truffles, but for kind of a dessert bar, I think you might want to have something a little bit more gooey. And for this, I'll just tell you the ingredients going in. So we've got dark chocolate. And again, like I said earlier, I melt my stuff down in a pan. So we're going to do this all on the induction stove here. So we're going to do 50 grams of chocolate. This could also be milk chocolate. I did do it with milk chocolate the other day. I'm a big dark chocolate fan though. So the milk chocolate didn't cut it for me. I just found like it just doesn't taste chocolatey enough for me. So I ended up putting some cocoa powder in. But, you know, you might decide it's fine for you. You might like a milk chocolate base or whoever you're making it for like. So that's our chocolate gone in. And then for our other ingredients we have, I'm going to put this onto a low temperature. And that's just pre-melted chocolate because I'm going to be using that for some other things. If you don't have pre-melted chocolate, you just melt chocolate in the pan like I said earlier, the same method. We're going to get in deodorized coconut oil, which just makes it a softer, melt in the mouth feel to the ganache. And while this is melting, let's just go over the other ingredients. So in this bowl, I have a combination of the Oatly cream, so a non-dairy cream, and condensed coconut milk. The Oatly cream, up to you. You can use any kind of dairy or non-dairy cream that you want. I don't mind what you use. You just need liquid for this to emulsify. And I found that the Oatly cream is really lovely. But again, you don't have that. Just use whatever you have. It's not like that big of a deal. It won't make a huge impact as long as you're using something that's nice and creamy. So you could make your own almond cream, maybe doing a ratio of like 2 parts almond, 1 part almonds to 2 parts water. So you get a resulting kind of cream rather than a really like milky one where it's a higher water content. I've done fermented cashew cream in the ganache before. What we're going to be looking for is the way that it emulsifies. And you can find that when you do the blending is where you'll see, do I need to add more liquid? Do I need to add less liquid? And through the experience of kind of making it a few times, you'll start to see what you like and how you want it to be as well. So now that that's melted, cashew cream, yeah, absolutely cashew cream, yeah. I don't know the ratio that you would, but I'm, like I say, I've done fermented cashew cream. So I guess, and that's quite thick and rich. So, I don't know what ratio you would use to do. I guess you do the same thing. It'd be like 100 grams of cashews to maybe 200, 250 grams of water. So once that has started to melt, which it has, the coconut oil is almost melted, I add in the condensed coconut cream, which is just lovely and sticky. It also has, if you're going to replace it with something else that's liquid, because you can, just bear in mind that it has its own setting features. So if you take a can of condensed coconut milk and you put it in the fridge, when you go to get it out, it's scoopable, like it's quite firm. So you're taking something out that has a setting property to it, and you'll need to just replace that in some way. So that can be by lowering the amount of liquid overall that you're adding to the chocolate, because then it's not going to set as firm. But it can also be adding in something else. So if you are a student of mine and you've done my caramels classes, basically the condensed cream is very similar to the caramels that I do. And you can use any of those caramels in place of the condensed coconut cream in this recipe. So that's all the ingredients. And now that they're all melted down, I'm going to put them through an immersion blender, which is going to be a little bit less easy to see because it's, an immersion blender. This is not a special piece of equipment. I didn't pay a lot for it. I got it on Amazon just to start doing some testing. So it's just a really inexpensive immersion blender, no special tool here at all. If you're doing a bigger recipe, so you doubled or tripled this, you could do it in your Vitamix. But because it's such a small amount and it's just enough to fit this frame, it doesn't fit in the Vitamix, like it won't blend. So I'll get this in. And at the moment, it doesn't look kind of thick and rich. Like it kind of looks almost like borderline congealed, because for emulsification, it really needs the movement and the motion of either whisking really, really intensely or blending in one way or another. And that's why using an immersion blender is fantastic. So the other thing I'm going to add to this is a little bit of tamari, which is always going to be an optional add-in. If you want to, you don't have to. So we'll blend it up, give it a taste, look at the texture, and then go from there and see if we want to add vanilla or anything else to it. And I want the blade to catch so that it's like, so that the blades are pulling the ganache down. That's what we want. We don't want it to just be like mixing it. We want it to be properly catching it and propelling it. And then what you'll see is it starts to thicken. So it has this really beautiful glossy, but it also thickens and it's more come together now. I tend to find that the complexion of it goes lighter when it's properly emulsified as well. So it'll be dark to begin with and then lighten as you emulsify. And I'm going to add a little bit more tamari to that. And a little bit of vanilla. And I use medicine flower vanilla extract, which is like, if you're going to spend money on vanilla, this is the one to get. See if I can get that where it's not blown out. Not really. Not really. Anyway, it's medicine flower. This is why I need to work on the lights, but that is to come. And we could add a little sea salt too. Let's just see how this goes first. And if it's not dark enough for you at this point, you could add cocoa powder to it as well. And that should do it now. That's luscious. So the vanilla adds just a beautiful richness to it that you don't have to add anything else to it to get that richness, which is quite delightful. It's why I really love medicine flower extracts. They don't just add the flavor that's like on the tin. They add so much more. Now, I'm going to temper this mixture because I temper all my ganaches and stuff, but I didn't used to, and you don't have to if you don't want to. Basically, any mixture that has cocoa butter in it, it is best when it's tempered. It's going to have better stability, it's going to set a lot better, and it's going to hold a lot better if it's been tempered. At the same time, if it freaks you out and you don't want to, then just don't. Question: the vanilla medicine flower extract contains alcohol? They have 3 ranges. So one is ethyl alcohol, one is a vegetable oil base, and one is MCT oil based. So you can choose the one that you like. I have used, I think, all of them. And honestly, the vanilla ones are the most incredible ever. I don't get paid to say this. I've used them for over a decade. And the ones that have been consistently the greatest are vanilla. Some of the other ones over time, I don't really like anymore. Like there's some of the berry ones that I'm not a big fan of. But overall, the vanilla ones have always stayed fantastic. So for tempering this, I'm going to give it a little stir at the moment. It's nice and viscous at this point. The other thing that changes is the viscosity of it. So it sits on your spatula in a different way. It kind of holds a little better, and there's a bigger like hold of it generally on top of the spatula when it's properly emulsified. And I temper using cocoa butter silk. So I was just taking the temperature to see if it's at the right one for adding the silk in, and it is. Now bear in mind, you're only tempering the chocolate that's in there. You're not tempering every ingredient. So it's only 50 grams. So about a half a gram of silk is fine and dandy. And MCT is absolutely, why would you say that MCT isn't healthy? I think of all the ones that are the least healthy would be the vegetable oil based one, but MCT oil is good stuff unless you know or eat something about it that I don't know. Please share. So you heard. All right. It must be new information. I've not heard that. Okay, so now we've got brownie base. We're going to pour our ganache on top. There's going to be a little bit left over. I like to use this leftover as a tester. I put it in the fridge and just see what's up with it, see how it's doing. It's a good way of telling when it's all set. So banging on the table just to get rid of air bubbles. You can get really expensive immersion blenders that apparently don't incorporate air, but I don't have one. So I use my hand to get rid of air bubbles. It doesn't really, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't matter. This isn't being sold. I'm going to basically give it to my friends. So this goes into the fridge. And I like to give it 24 hours because I like for it to dry out on the surface a little bit. If you come to it a little bit too early, it won't be dry. But what happens is, and this is the one that I made in advance for the class, it dries out around the edges, which makes it easier to get out, and the surface dries a little bit as well. So I'll see if we can get a close-up of that, where it's dried and come away from the edge here a little bit. Not sure if that's visible or not. A little bit of feedback wouldn't hurt from the crowd. And then let's just see if we can, basically you could push it out from this stage, but I'm just going to give a little bit of a loosening. So I use a thin knife and I run it down the edge of where the brownie and the ganache are, but I'm pushing this way against the frame. So I'm not pushing into the ganache itself and like ruining the bar. Okay, so that loosens it sufficiently to be able to pop it out. And then this is the result of what it looks like at the moment. And now I'm going to cut it. So using this really thin knife, if you need to, you can warm it a little bit. Don't go mental with warming it, because if you warm it too much, it's just going to melt right through the ganache, and it's going to be a little bit messy to then work with for dipping and stuff. So I just go kind of half. Cuts beautifully. I mean, look, beautifully cut. Such a lovely recipe, this. And then from here, you could go squares, you can go bars, but to get even sizes, I'm not saying that I do evenly very well, but go half and then go half again. I found that to be the most reliable way because my eyes don't see even. Clean your knife after each cut so you're not getting residue on the top. And also don't handle them too much, especially where the ganache is, because you might end up melting the ganache a little bit. I have really warm hands, so that also doesn't help. Beautiful. And then what we have, because these did dry out for that 24-hour period, is we have the dry, I don't know how much you can see this because my screen is incredibly small, but you've got a kind of dryness on the top, which is nice, and then you have this gooey kind of melty inside. I didn't even warm the knife, and it just has these beautiful layers to it. And you could mess around with this ganache recipe to, like, you know, spice it up, etc., change the base. You know, everything's always very versatile. So now we're going to look at dipping this in chocolate. And like I explained before, the way that I melt my chocolate is in a big pan. So let's just see what temperature this is at. Has anybody seen my thermometer? I got it. Okay, we'll get this into a bowl. It's a shame you don't live closer because I'll tell you what, my neighbors eat real well. I moved recently from a development where there were like 6 homes, including mine, and we all lived very close. It was sort of like townhouses is what you describe it as in the States. And everybody there got lots of chocolate. Whoever wanted it, got it. Where I live now, a little bit less neighborly, unfortunately, but there's never a shortage of people to give chocolate to. Okay, so the chocolate's at 38 degrees. I'm going to take that down a little bit further. Does anybody have any suggestions about what you would want to garnish this with? Without me telling you anything that's available, like what comes to mind that you'd want to garnish this with? Come on, y'all. I know y'all got some ideas out there. Coconut flakes. All right. What else you got? Cocoa nibs. Boom. How did you know? Literally just reach for them. Coconut, cocoa nibs, crunchy thing, flaky. I think you're meant to say salt. I'm pretty sure I got flaky salt. Sure, absolutely. Digging it. Nuts. Yep. Some roasted nuts would be a delight. Flaky salt. Yeah, she got it that time. I got you the first time, though. All right. We got cocoa nibs. We got flake sea salt. I think I have some roasted almonds somewhere. Crunchy salt. Yeah, crunchy salt, flaky salt on it. Let's grab some, nothing fancy to distract from the chocolate curls. But chocolate curls, oh yeah, you reminded me. Thank you very much for that. So a couple weeks ago, we did the truffles. And remember if you were on that class or watched it afterwards, do you remember these little beauties that came from the truffles that we made? These make a great garnish as well. So thank you for all the ideas. There we go. Boom, boom, boom. We've got flake salt, great idea, cocoa nibs, and chocolate curls. Definitely some freeze-dried fruit. Does anybody know why putting freeze-dried fruit on top would be maybe over time not a great idea? Anybody riddle me that? What would happen to freeze-dried fruit over a period of a few days, do we think? Gonna temper this with soak, but this is roughly 300, 400 grams of chocolate. It will get soft, absolutely. So because it's a freeze-dried fruit rather than a dried fruit, what they take away from the fruit when they freeze-dry it is the moisture. And the moisture in the air will go into the freeze-dried fruit and soften it. So there's companies now, well, for a long time, I should think, that have made freeze-dried fruits that are coated in things like cocoa butter, maltodextrin mixed with things like maltodextrin, things that inhibit the absorption of moisture. So if you're into that kind of thing, you can use that. But otherwise, you'd want to avoid freeze-dried fruit. If you're serving it right away, fine. But if it's something that you want to keep for a while, then you want to avoid freeze-dried fruit. Okay. So I think I'm going to do this with a hand situation. So thing that you're dipping to your left, I think I'm probably going to put them on the same tray. So we'll just take these off. With bars like this, I don't like the whole thing completely coated. You might decide that you would like that. That's totally your prerogative if you would. I like to hold it from the brownie base, nice and stable. And then I tilt the bowl to the side to get a big puddle of chocolate, and then back and forth quite rapidly. If you don't want to do tempered chocolate, if that's something that you're not interested in, you can melt your, we'll do cocoa nibs on this first one. Pretty, maybe sea salt also, I think. You can do dark chocolate with a little bit of coconut oil through it. The coconut oil will stop blemishes from occurring in the chocolate, because you've added additional fat. It just won't temper. And the only downside of that is you will need to keep them in the refrigerator. And then we've got our lovely chocolate flakes going on top of this one. Maybe a little sea salt in addition. And once these are done, because you do have a ganache in here, you want to store these at around no higher than sort of 18 degrees room temperature. If you have a wine fridge, that's a great place to store it. I'm talking to my chocolate making friends out there. If you don't, then a fridge in a airtight container. When you take it out of the fridge, anytime you take chocolate out of the fridge, if it's in an airtight container, leave it in the container to come to room temperature before opening it, because there's going to be moisture and humidity. So if you leave it in the container, you won't get that moisture and humidity on the surface of the bars. It'll be on the container and it will gradually come to room temperature, and you'll avoid that. Crunchy, oh, we got a delayed reaction. Crunchy candied nuts or seeds would be a good idea. I think of course it's a great idea. Who doesn't love candied nuts? Not this chick. But you got the same issue that would occur as with the freeze-dried fruit, whereby because the candied nuts have sugar in them, any kind of sugar, any kind of sweetener, that's going to take on moisture over time and lose its crunch. So roasted nuts, absolutely. Dried fruit, 100%. Banana chips, absolutely. Anything freeze-dried, anything that's going to take on moisture and go soft, we want to avoid using as a garnish. But nibs, roasted nuts, fantastico. Sea salt, always a good idea. There we go. Finito. Now, when you're done with your dipping chocolate, if you aren't familiar with working with chocolate, want some ideas on that, you literally just heat that with a hairdryer or a heat gun to get it out of the bowl. Really easy method for doing that. Don't bother with bain-marie methods. They're messy, they hurt your hands. Use a heat gun, get it all out of the bowl, back into your pan or into a container, and then you just use it again when it comes to using it. And here are our bars, finitoed. Let's do a little choppy chop, karate chop. Bearing in mind, the tempered chocolate has just been tempered and gone on. It's not going to be fully tempered at this point, which means it hasn't fully crystallized and isn't entirely stable. So if you see it melting in my hand a little bit, that's why. Oof, absolute delight. And there's our finished bar. Really pretty, very simple, and delightful. And you can do this in stages. You know, if it feels like it's too much to do it all in one go, do the base first, maybe later in the day or the next day, pour your ganache on the next day, cut it and dip it, or cut it one day, dip it the next day. Take it in the stages that work for you. Don't feel like you have to do it all in one go. Store it in an airtight container in the refrigerator for probably up to at least a week, if not longer. What I would be looking for, I haven't tested it, but I would be looking for in the fridge, does it dry out? How does it hold up? I know this ganache lasts a really long time because I've done it in bonbons, and it's kept, a vanilla version of this has kept for 8 weeks. And when I say kept, it just dries out. It doesn't go off. It doesn't go moldy or anything. So it's got a really nice shelf life on it. So we would just be testing, like, how does it hold up in the fridge, especially with cold and chocolate. Yeah. And other than that, enjoy. I mean, I think you could store them in the freezer and take them out as you want to eat them if you want to do that. It's going to not be great for the tempered chocolate, but that's not such a big deal if you're having them for home. Any questions before we finish? Comments, concerns? If you wanted to make it a bit spicy, what would you start with? I like to control spice because it can get a little bit out of hand. So I'm just thinking, would I put it through the ganache? Would I put it through the brownie base? Or would I put it as a garnish on top? Because then it's really controlled. I might start with, it really depends on what you want to go for. I feel like if you put it through the ganache, it's pretty controlled in that way. And you're only getting a little bit in every bite anyway. So maybe that would be the way to go. And when you taste the ganache, I think that the spice would develop over time a little bit. So when you make it in the first place, if you can taste the spice and you think, yeah, that's quite nice, I'd probably stop there because I feel like it will develop and open up a little bit over time, and then see how that goes. And if you need to, then you can, next time you make it, you add a little bit more spice. The other option would be doing like I think a Korean chili powder like you'd use for kimchi would be nice because it's not overly hot and it has some other nice flavor profiles to it. And maybe sprinkling that on top, or doing that like a cocoa nib coated in like Korean chili powder and using that. I don't know, things like that probably. Tina, always lovely to see you. Thank you so much for coming. Steve, absolute pleasure to have you, buddy. I hope things are going well in your part of the world. Yulia, thank you so much for coming. Antoinette, always a joy to have you. Nutmeg sounds fantastic. I think she meant spicy as in heat, but maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, any spices, good Lord. In the brownie, I'd probably put it through the brownie if I was doing spices like that. Jasmine, thank you for coming. Lovely to see you. And Narit, thank you for coming all the way from Israel. Thank you very much, everybody. It was so nice to see you. Remember that you can watch this video again on YouTube at any time, and the recipe is in the caption. If you have any questions, do let me know. Lovely to see you. Have a lovely day. Bye-bye.